Hey guys, tonight we're stepping quietly into ancient Rome, not to fight in the Colosseum or lounge in marble baths, but to do something much waxier. You're not a senator, a gladiator, or a god king. You're a candle maker, and it's not glamorous. You probably won't survive this century. The wax fumes alone might get you. You're waking up in Subura, Rome's famously chaotic neighborhood, a smoky maze of tenements, public cookshops, and people arguing about vinegar. Your apartment is on the third floor of a wooden insula. It's technically illegal to have a fires pier, but you light one anyway, carefully. You're already behind schedule. The room is dark except for the faint reddish glow from your coals. You pull on a tunic stiff with yesterday's sweat and dust. The air smells like old cheese, wet stone, and a hint of melted animal fat leftovers from last night's candle batch. One pigeon watches you from the rafters. You nod, it does not nod back. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And hey, drop your location and local time in the comments. I love knowing who else is listening around the world. Now dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You step out into the alley with your tools wrapped in cloth, a double-handled copper ladle, a wick stretcher, and a small mold shaped like an eagle for fancy clients. The street is already waking, vendors swatting flies off figs, a woman yelling about her missing cat, and a man loudly reciting poetry to no one in particular. As you trudge downhill toward the shop, your sandals slip a bit on the slick stones. Rain from last night has mixed with everything else, ashes, fish guts, and whatever someone dropped from a window. You walk around it without thinking. That's just Subura logic. You pass a shrine, tucked into a wall, lit with a single olive oil lamp. The flame flickers when you glance at it. You whisper a half-hearted prayer to whatever minor household god oversees fire safety and bee colonies. Nobody wants their candle shop to burn down again. At the base of the hill, your shop leans slightly to the left. It always has. The sign says Luciv Sera Al-Sami Wimina for Vimina for VM, which means Lucius Wax Lights for the Forum. You're Lucius, by the way, or maybe not. Maybe you're his cousin, or apprentice, or just someone who showed up and never left. You unlock the wooden doors and breathe in the cold scent of tallow and clay. The workshop's small. One bench, 3 fire pits, a pile of wax in a corner, and a heavy bronze pot that never truly cools. On one wall, shelves are stacked with molds, cylinders, torches, little cup lamps, even a set shaped like dolphins that you regret ever making. Historians still argue whether Roman candles were mostly utilitarian or ritualistic. You know the answer is both. Rich people like mood lighting. Gods demand it. You set the fires under the pots. They flare up with a soft whoosh. You stir the semi-hardened wax with your ladle, watching the lumps slowly dissolve. It smells better than usual, less like a slaughterhouse, more like wet bread. Progress. You hang today's batch of wicks on a wooden rack. They're made from flax, twisted by hand and dusted with salt to keep them burning evenly. A few have knots or frays. You sigh. Your apprentice must have rushed again. As the wax melts, you prep the molds, a little oil to prevent sticking. A whisper of charm muttered under your breath. Not because you believe in it, but because your grandmother did, and her candles never cracked. A neighbor stops by to borrow a pinch of lye. She doesn't ask. She just takes it and tells you your roof tiles look precarious. She's not wrong. You remind her to return your clay bowl. She won't. While pouring your first batch, you hear a commotion outside. Someone's donkey has apparently eaten a scroll belonging to a lawyer. Voices rise. You ignore it. Focus. Wax to mold, smooth motion, steady hand. By now, sunlight is slanting through the open doorway, catching motes of dust and steam. The shop smells sharp, animal, and slightly sweet. The first candle sets with a satisfying firmness. You tap the mold, solid. Outside, the city pulses. Inside, you keep working slowly, methodically, knowing that by nightfall, this entire batch will be gone. Used in temples, homes, bathhouses, and yes, probably another donkey, Related incident. You've learned not to ask. One final glance at the flames, they're steady. You stretch your back, already sore. A pigeon lands on the windowsill and eyes your wax. You throw it a crumb. It doesn't say thank you. You take a break, not because you're done, but because your back has started whispering threats. There's no chair, so you lean against the warm wall, arms crossed, watching wax cool into silence. One of the molds hisses slightly. That's normal, probably. It's not even mid-morning, but the street outside is alive in that chaotic Roman way. A child runs past with what looks like a dead chicken and too much enthusiasm. You sip lukewarm barley water from a clay cup that tastes faintly of last week's garlic. Hydration, sort of. The candles you make today aren't just for lighting hallways. Some will go to temples, Apollo's shrine up the hill, or the little one dedicated to Closina, goddess of sewers. The rest are headed to rich homes where no one remembers your name but wants everything done by Saturn's feast or else. You turn back to your bench. The molds are ready for removal. Carefully, you crack one open. The candle slides out clean, pale yellow, shaped like a stylized laurel crown. It's for a magistrate's dinner party. A centerpiece he will claim to have made himself. You'll roll your eyes privately. You wipe the mold, oil it again, and reach for the next wick. Your hands move by memory now. Dip, pour, cool, twist. You hum an off key melody your mother used to sing while making vinegar cakes. The song has no words, just a rhythm that matches the slosh of wax and the scrape of bronze. Historians still argue whether early Roman candles used more beeswax or tallow. You could settle the debate by letting them spend one morning scraping hardened cow fat off a fire pit. Beeswax smells like summer and flowers. Allow smells like something died, because something did. You use both, depending on who's buying. Priests prefer beeswax. It burns cleaner and pleases the gods. Bakers and innkeepers settle for tallow, because it's cheap and functional, and nobody expects romance during a 2 bread delivery. You check the fire. It's getting low. With practiced ease, you feed it slivers of dried olive wood. A tiny crackle answers you. The potter's surface dances with light. You reach for your ladle, stir once clockwise, always clockwise, and get back to it. Your apprentice arrives late, as usual, with a guilty expression and wax on his sleeve. He mumbles something about goats and a runaway cart. You don't ask. You hand him the weak stretcher and point to the pile waiting in the corner. He sighs. You sigh louder. While he works, you prepare a new mold, this one shaped like an oil lamp. They're tricky. If the wick doesn't sit just right, it burns sideways, spits wax, and scares the dog. You don't have a dog, but you've heard stories. A neighbor pokes his head in. He wants 2 votives shaped like dolphins for his niece's birthday. You try not to groan. Those molds take forever to clean, but business is business. And the niece's father is a senator's cousin's brother. In law, so you nod graciously and pretend you enjoy dolphin shapes. As the molds fill up again, the shop heats up. You open the side door and let in a breeze. It smells of wine, wet brick, and optimism. For one strange moment, you feel content. Not rich, not powerful, but necessary. People don't think about the humble candle maker when they light up a shrine or stumble home after dark, but you're there, burning quietly at the edges of everything. Your work touches temples, births, funerals, secret trysts, and very confused donkeys. Your apprentice asks how many candles a Roman wedding needs. You say as many as they can afford. He laughs, then asks if you've ever been married. You say once. She hated the smell. He stops asking. The molds are full again. The bench is cluttered with still, cooling shapes. You stack finished candles into a crate, wrapped in linen to keep the bees out. A label in charcoal reads, "To forum baths before sundown." You send your apprentice off with it, hoping he doesn't stop for dates or dice. You scrub wax off your tools with hot vinegar and sand. It's tedious but oddly satisfying. The room smells sour, clean, a little burned. You think briefly about inventing a better system, maybe a rotating mold or something steam powered. Then you remember this is Rome. The best idea wins only if it doesn't annoy someone in a higher toga. Lunch is a dry crust of bread and half a fig. You eat it leaning on a barrel, watching the fire flicker, and thinking about how weirdly pretty melting wax can be, like lava, but less judgmental. Outside, someone starts playing a reed flute. Badly, it mixes with the clink of horse hooves, and a merchant shouting about olives. You stretch your arms and get ready for the next round. The fire waits, the wax waits, and the dolphins, unfortunately, also wait. The dolphin molds are a pain in every conceivable way. You balance them carefully on the worktable, pressing the wicks into place with a slender bronze needle. If the wax doesn't settle perfectly, the tail gets lumpy and the dolphin looks more like a disgruntled eel, which has happened twice. Outside, the sun is nearing its peak. The heat drifts into the workshop in waves, turning the air thick and waxy. You don't bother wiping your brow anymore. It's useless. Instead, you roll your sleeves higher and drink from the water jar, which is warmed to the exact temperature of body complaints. The dolphin candles are meant for a little girl's dies lustricus, her naming ceremony. Roman children weren't officially named until their 9th day, 8th for girls, a grim nod to how precarious early life could be. But once a baby survived the first week, the family lit candles, offered incense, and celebrated like Jupiter himself had RSVP'd. You wonder if this child will remember your candles. Probably not, but you hope they bring a little magic to the afternoon all the same. While the molds set, you trim some wicks for a batch of funeral tapers, long, thin, somber. These go to a widow who specified no scent, no color, no fuss. She's buried 3 husbands already, so you don't argue. Historians still debate whether candle makers were considered tradesmen, artisans, or just necessary nuisances. Your vote depends on who's buying. When a patrician walks in, you're a master of your craft. When it's a harried cook needing light before sunrise, you're that wax guy. A bee buzzes in through the open door, probably drawn by the faint floral notes of your beeswax supply. You wave it off gently. Bees are sacred to many. Romans, messengers of the gods, some say. You like the idea. Every time you harvest wax, you whisper a thanks, just in case. The dolphin candles are finally solid. You tap one loose. It breaks cleanly, fins intact. A small miracle. You pack them with olive leaves in a woven basket and scrawl a delivery tag. To Flavia, 9th day, may Fortuna watch your steps. You add a tiny wax rose as a flourish. The girl will smile, you hope. Your apprentice returns sweaty and crumb-covered. You don't ask. He tells you a man at the forum wants 40 altar lights by tomorrow. You nod, then regret nodding. That's a long night coming. You split the task. He'll mold while you wick. You show him how to double-twist the fibers for longer burns. He forgets halfway through. You sigh loudly. The sun shifts west. Shadows stretch across the cobbles outside. Somewhere down the alley, someone's playing a lyre better than the flute, worse than silence. You take a moment to watch the street. A woman sells roses by the armful. A boy offers honey cakes and steals 2. A soldier walks by with a face like granite and a feather sticking out of his helmet at a hilarious angle. You grin. He doesn't notice. Back inside, you pull out your prized mold. A statue-shaped candle of Minerva. Nope. Only wealthy clients order these, usually for dedication ceremonies or very formal dinners where people pretend not to notice the roast peacock sweating on a silver plate. You pour beeswax carefully. The goddess's spear must set just right. Any wobble, and she looks like she's fencing with a baguette. Your apprentice leans over too far, knocks a pot, and nearly drops a taper into his sleeve. You save it with a flick. He mumbles an apology. You tell him to go clean the soot off the cauldron. Give him something he can't mess up, probably. The workshop smells now of lavender wax, charred wicks, and young panic. Classic blend. You hum your mother's melody again. The wax listens. At twilight, you light one of the day's test candles. The flame catches slowly, then settles into a steady glow. It casts a warm circle on the table, flickering gently with every breath of wind. You watch it dance, and in that golden halo you see your whole day flickering back at you. Tiny light, big world. The customer arrives just as you're brushing soot off your forearms. A senator's steward, broad-shouldered, tunic neat, sandals polished like he's Sandra's way to marry a marble statue. He carries a small scroll and the kind of condescending patience you recognize from people who've never touched hot wax in their lives. 40 altar lights, he says, like it's your fault he has to speak out loud. You nod, already pulling the finished batch into view. You wrapped them in soft cloth tied in bundles of 10, each dyed a subtle saffron yellow, an expensive touch for temple candles, but senators like their piety to smell slightly of money. These are beeswax, of course. You say mildly, longer burn, less smoke. The steward pretends not to care, but he breathes deeper, just once. Everyone notices the difference. He hands over a coin pouch that jingles more modestly than you'd hoped. You'll be delivering these to the Temple of Vesta, he adds, before sunrise, of course. Vesta, the goddess of hearth, home, and eternal flame. Her temple's fire must never go out. The Vestal virgins tend it day and night, and they don't take kindly to tardy deliveries. After he leaves, you sit on a stool and let your back complain for a while. The wax is softening again in the evening heat, and your hands smell like the ghost of 1,000 flowers. You remember once hearing a story, maybe true, maybe not, about a chandler in Naples who accidentally used wax tainted with fish oil. The resulting candles gave off a stench so vile. It cleared a forum. You've since made a personal vow, never mix animal fats unless the client is legally blind or very, very rich. Historians still argue whether Roman candles were more symbolic than practical. After all, most light came from oil lamps. But candles had a ceremonial weight, used in rites of passage, marriages, sacrifices. A flickering taper said something oil never could. It whispered, "This moment matters." As you check the base of a large pillar candle, your apprentice returns, face lit with purpose. "There's a merchant asking for novelty candles," he says, as if this is an insult. You arch a brow. Novelty shapes, symbols, a snail. You almost laugh. Almost. Did he say why? The apprentice shrugs. He's hosting a banquet themed around time and slowness. You blink, then nod. Snail it is. You dig through your box of discarded molds, scraps of odd commissions, a laughing setter, a she-wolf, a stylized fig leaf. No snail, but you could adapt that coiled shell from your ammonite mold, add a blob of wax for the body, maybe poke 2 eyes with a stylus. You call it interpretive sculpture and move on. Meanwhile, the senator's candles are ready to be loaded for delivery. You wrap them in fresh linen and seal the bundle with red wax stamped with your maker's mark, a tiny flame framed by laurel leaves. You like to think of it as a promise. The apprentice lingers. "Do you think people notice our work?" You pause, one hand on the shutter. "They notice when it goes wrong," you say. "But when it goes right, they remember the light." He nods slowly, doesn't get it yet. Will, someday. Outside, twilight has turned into indigo. The stars are not yet visible, but the moon is starting to lift, pale and half-hearted. You shoulder the bundle of altar lights and begin the slow walk to the forum. The streets are quieter now, just the clatter of carts, the mumble of neighbors, the stray shout from a tavern halfway through its 4th amphora of regret. As you pass a street corner, a stray dog pads after you for a few steps. You toss it a wax scrap you flavored with honey months ago. It sniffs, wags once, and vanishes into shadow. Good trade. The Temple of Vesta stands at the heart of the city like a white marble heartbeat. It's circular, elegant, and always smells faintly of ashen roses. A novice Vestal meets you at the side entrance. She's young, serious, her head shaved in the ritual style, eyes sharp as flint. You bow slightly, hand her the bundle. She checks the seal, nods once, and disappears into the sacred shadows without a word. As you turn to leave, you glimpse the eternal flame through the doorway. It flickers steadily, golden and proud. Your candles will feed that fire. For a little while, your work becomes part of something Older, purer, more mysterious than even the empire itself, you walk back through sleeping Rome, the scent of warm wax still on your fingers, your feet echoing softly on the cobblestones. A breeze drifts through the alleyways, carrying the laughter of someone far off and the distant chime of a wind bell, and above it all, the moon finally shines, full and forgiving. Morning comes far too soon. As always, you're jolted awake not by a rooster, those are more for dramatic playwrights than actual Roman candlemakers, but by the heat, even before sunrise. The air is heavy, sticky with anticipation of another sweltering day. You drag yourself upright from your narrow cot bones, cracking in protest. Your apprentice is already up, bless him, attempting to wrestle open the wax storage chest with all the grace of a drunken centaur. You stop him before he snaps the lid. Use the key. It's called security, not weightlifting. You both step into the workspace, which smells of wax and dust and ambition. Light filters through the shutters in narrow beams, illuminating motes that float like lost souls. You kneel to check the temperature of yesterday's pour, still tacky in the center. That won't do. Beeswax is a diva in warm weather, needs coaxing. As you set the pots back over the small brazier, your apprentice clears his throat. Question you brace. How come we don't use tallow like the baker's brother? There it is. Because you sigh. Tallow smells like regret and old sandals. Beeswax burns longer, cleaner, and doesn't chase your customers into the Tiber. He nods solemnly, as though you've just shared the secrets of the Vestal Virgins. Historians still argue whether the use of beeswax over tallow in Rome was a matter of prestige or practicality. The truth, both. Rich homes preferred the sweet scent and slow burn. Temples demanded purity. But down in the poor insulae, a smoky lump of animal fat would do. Assuming the rats hadn't chewed the wick, you send the apprentice out to collect fresh flax thread for wicks, and maybe try not to overpay this time. That leaves you blessedly alone with the simmering wax and the rhythmic work of shaping, dipping and trimming. Dip, hang, twist. Dip, hang, twist. You lose yourself in the quiet repetition muscles, remembering the motions long after your mind has wandered into other territories. You recall once hearing that in the East, somewhere along the Parthian, border candle makers would embed messages in the wax. Small charms, fragments of poetry. Let the flame reveal the words one line at a time. You wonder if it's true or just another traveling merchant tale meant to sell exotic lies. Still, there's something poetic about it. You glance over at your pile of molds. Nothing fancy, wooden and bronze forms shaped like torches, pears, flowers, even a miniature bust of Jupiter you once used for a festival commission. That one melted at an awkward angle and gave the king of gods an unfortunate droop. You keep it as a paperweight. The day's orders include a set of hand candles for a midwife, a standard ritual for births to guide the soul's first steps. You carve tiny sigils into their bases, barely legible, but enough to nudge fate politely in the right direction. A charm here, a whisker there. Midwives swear by it. You're just finishing a set of triple wick tapers when the front curtain rustles and in steps a woman wrapped in a dark, stola face hidden under a veil. You know better than to ask questions. The quiet ones always want funeral candles. Sure enough, she hands over a small ivory token marked with a funerary spiral, 13 vigil lights. She says softly, "For a child." You nod, your throat dry. No paperwork, no questions. You'll make them thinner, easier to carry in procession, with lavender oil mixed in, a comfort however small. After she leaves, the shop feels colder despite the summer heat. You sit for a moment, staring into the glowing brazier, wax bubbling like the surface of a too-quiet lake. Some days the job is all light and laughter. Others, it's shadow and memory. You think about that eternal flame again. Burning in Vesta. Temple, unflickering, immortal. What must it be like to be a flame that never grieves? But you don't stay in the thought too long. There's work to finish, and too many people depending on a bit of borrowed light. The apprentice returns with a bundle of flax, a new burn mark on his arm, and a pomegranate for you. You take it wordlessly and bite into the sweet, tart seeds as he organizes the wick, cutting table. One of the benefits of your trade, sticky hands are practically a requirement. As the sun climbs, casting slashes of gold across the floor, you hang the latest batch near the shutter to cool, praying the heat doesn't turn them into misshapen worms. Outside, the streets are humming now, merchants, priests, gamblers, poets, all jostling for space on Rome's overheated arteries, and you go back to the molds. There's a wedding order to prepare a bridal crown made entirely of braided candle, rope, to be worn during the ceremony and then burned in the hearth that night, symbol of purity, fertility, and marital endurance. Though if the groom is anything like his father, you suspect it won't survive the week. You chuckle to yourself, draw another handful of flax, and start the twist anew. By midday, the shop is alive with the low hum of business, but your mind is elsewhere, still caught in the folds of wax and flame, shadow and light. You pause at the counter as a small boy bursts in, cheeks flushed from running, clutching a broken candle stub. My mother says you fix candles. He says, wide-eyed and hopeful. You nod. I do, but this is a candle that's seen better days, like Rome, in summer. He looks confused. So you soften it. Come, sit. I'll show you. You take the stub and dip it gently into a pot of warm beeswax, smoothing the edges with practiced fingers. As you work, you explain that candles weren't just for light. They were messages, prayers, sometimes even political statements. During certain festivals, candles were decorated with wax seals bearing symbols like the laurel wreath for victory or the owl for wisdom. The boy's eyes widen. So candles are like secret letters. Exactly, but the secret's in the flame. You tell him about how, in the quieter corners of the empire, candle makers would hide tiny charms in the wax, maybe a piece of coral to ward off evil, or a sprinkle of crushed herbs to bring sweet dreams. Historians still argue whether this was widespread or just a niche superstition. But it makes the job more interesting, don't you think? He nods solemnly. Then asks, can I be a candle maker? You laugh softly, only if you're ready for early mornings, sticky fingers, and endless patience. The boy grins, as if that's the best offer ever. Just then the door swings open again. This time it's a tall man in a toga, the telltale sign of a senator. He carries a small box, adorned with gold leaf and tied with a crimson ribbon. For the festival of Saturn, he announces, I require the finest candles. Long-lasting pure beeswax, and with a faint scent of myrtle. You nod, hiding a smile. The senator's request is demanding but classic. Rich Romans adore a show of refinement. You assure him the order will be ready by sundown. After he leaves, you turn back to the apprentice. Time to mix the myrtle essence. While the apprentice starts grinding fresh myrtle leaves, you reflect on the peculiar role candles play in Roman society, not just illumination but ceremony, protection, and even social signaling. Remember the story of the Vestal Virgins. They guarded the eternal flame in the temple of Vesta, a flame said to protect the city itself. If it went out, Rome was in trouble, serious trouble. But the Vestals weren't just fire tenders, they were powerful women, whose purity and service commanded respect and fear. The candles you make are tiny echoes of that eternal flame, humble yet potent. You dip wicks into the scented wax and begin assembling the senator's order. The air fills with a delicate pine and citrus aroma, mingling with the thicker beeswax smell. You think how, despite all the grandeur of the empire, a well-made candle still holds unmatched power, the power to calm a room, mark an occasion, or ward off darkness. Historians still argue whether the Vestal flame was more religious symbol or political tool, but either way, it's a flame you respect. You glance at your apprentice, who's now covered in wax drips but smiling like he's found his calling. You remember when you were his age too, wide-eyed and full of hope. The afternoon drags on in this soothing rhythm of wax, weeks, and whispered histories. Just as you're finishing the senator's order, a strange smell wafts in, something sharp and herbal, like a distant forest. It reminds you of a tale about a far-off province where candle makers used a resin called storax, said to have mystical qualities. You tell the apprentice about it, and he looks ready to pack his bags for adventure before you get too carried away with thoughts of storax forests and far-flung trades. The shop door creaks open one last time this afternoon. This time it's a woman in a vibrant tunic, her eyes bright with excitement. "I heard you make candles that help with insomnia," she says. You blink. "That's a new one." You nod slowly. "Yes, some add herbs like lavender or chamomile to the wax. It's not a cure, more a suggestion." She smiles. "Perfect. I'll take 5. As she leaves, you settle into the familiar rhythm of the candle maker's day. The slow pour, the delicate twist, the quiet hope that a little light can ease a heavy mind. The afternoon sun softens as it filters through the dusty windows, casting long golden bars across your workspace. Your fingers move almost without thought, dipping wicks and smoothing wax while your mind wanders through the daily rhythm that has defined your life. The faint scent of beeswax mingles with the lingering myrtle, creating a strangely comforting atmosphere, like a memory you didn't know you had. A customer's footsteps echo from the street, slower this time, more deliberate. A scholar, by the look of his toga and the bundle of scrolls under his arm. He greets you with a tired smile and sets down a small, oddly shaped piece of wood. "Can you make a candle holder like this?" he asks, tracing the intricate carvings. You nod, already imagining the final piece. In ancient Rome, candle holders, candelabra, weren't just functional. They were art and status symbols. Some wealthy households had silver or bronze ones, sometimes shaped like mythical creatures or wrapped in ivy. You tell him about how the shape and decoration of a candle holder could hint at the owner's taste, wealth, or even philosophy. The scholar leans in, lowering his voice. "I'm researching the peculiar superstitions around light and darkness in different parts of the empire. Did you know some believe shadows cast by candlelight can trap spirits? Others say the flame itself is a living soul." You chuckle softly. Historians still argue whether these beliefs influenced Roman rituals or if they were just local folklore. As you work on the delicate holder, you share a less-known tale about a Roman family who believed lighting multiple candles during storms could confuse the thunder god and keep lightning at bay. It sounds a bit like a bedtime story, but for them, it was a serious safety measure. Your apprentice watches, fascinated, as you carefully carve a tiny laurel wreath into the holder's base, a nod to Apollo, god of light, music, and poetry. You explain how Apollo's presence was felt even in the simplest of candles, believed to guide the flame and keep evil spirits away. The scholar nods thoughtfully. The connection between light and the divine is fascinating. It's no wonder candles played such an important role, not only in homes but in temples and ceremonies. As twilight deepens, the workshop grows quieter. The apprentice packs up his tools, eyes gleaming with new ideas about superstition and light. You finish the candle holder just as the sun dips below the horizon, painting the sky in shades of deep orange and purple. You step outside, feeling the cool evening air on your skin, and glance back at the glowing workshop, now full of candles, waiting for their turn to burn bright in Roman homes. There's a calmness here, a quiet promise that even as empires rise and fall, the humble candle endures. You think of the Vestal Virgins again, their eternal flame flickering in the temple, a symbol of Rome, as endurance, mystery, and fragile beauty. Historians still debate whether the practical uses of candles ever truly separated from their spiritual significance, but for you, that blend of function and faith is what makes your craft so timeless. You close the workshop doors gently, the faint scent of myrtle and beeswax lingering in the evening air. Evening settles softly, wrapping the city in a hushed blanket of cool air and distant murmurs. You're back inside your workshop, the flicker of a few test candles casting dancing shadows on the walls lined with shelves full of wax, wicks, and tools worn smooth by years of use. This quiet hour feels like a small oasis from the bustling Roman streets outside. You pause to breathe in the warm scent of melting wax and beeswax, a comforting aroma that seems to settle the restless parts of your mind. It's almost like a secret language. This smell, spoken only by those who know the craft intimately. You let your fingers trail over a nearly finished candle, noting the slight imperfections that give it character. You think about how candles in ancient Rome weren't just light sources, they were companions to everyday life. From the dim corners of taverns to the grandeur of banquet halls, candles marked time, mood, and sometimes even status. A flickering flame could signal an invitation, a warning, or a prayer. There's a story you recall about Roman soldiers who carried small candles during night watches, the flames carefully shielded from wind and enemy eyes. Some say these candles were scented with herbs like rosemary and lavender to calm nerves, while others whisper that the flame itself was thought to guard against evil spirits lurking in the dark. You share this with your apprentice, who smiles and asks if you believe in such things. You laugh quietly. Historians still argue whether these superstitions shaped the way Romans used candles, or if it's just poetic imagination. Your mind drifts to the peculiar art of candle making itself. Did you know that some Roman candles were colored using natural dyes? Reds from madder root, blues from indigo, and yellows from saffron. While many might have thought color unnecessary for a flame, these hues added a soft glow, lending a festive or solemn air to special occasions. You gently dip a wick into molten wax, watching the way the light bends and refracts in the smooth surface. The process is slow, almost meditative, like a dance with fire. Each candle is a small story, a flicker of history forged by patient hands. A client once told you that the scent of a candle could evoke powerful memories: a mother's kitchen, a lover's farewell, a city's rain-soaked evening. You agree, thinking of the fragrances you blend yourself, hints of myrtle, pine, and the faintest trace of honey. As night deepens, you glance out the window and see the stars beginning to peek through the velvet sky. Rome is alive with distant laughter and the occasional clatter of horse hooves. Your candle flames seem to pulse gently in response, steady and warm. You finish your workbench for the day, laying out a few special candles meant for a festival honoring Vesta, goddess of the hearth. These candles will burn bright through the night, a symbol of protection and continuity. The apprentice yawns but stays eager, asking you about the strange debate among scholars. Did the Romans invent candles independently, or were they inspired by Eastern cultures who traded exotic waxes and oils along the Silk Road? You answer with a smile. Historians still argue whether candle making in Rome was a local craft or a borrowed art, but whatever the origin, we've certainly made it our own. You blow out the last candle, the room falling into gentle darkness, the faint smell of beeswax lingering like a lullaby. The first light of dawn barely creeps through the shutters when you're already stirring awake. Your body aches in familiar ways, the result of a long day's work and the restless rhythm of your craft. But there's a quiet satisfaction in this soreness, like a well-earned badge. You dress quickly in your simple tunic, careful not to disturb the household. Outside, the city is just beginning to yawn awake, merchants arranging their stalls, the distant clatter of carts, and the faint calls of street vendors hawking everything from fresh bread to fish. Today, you'll visit the bustling forum, not just for supplies but to observe the shifting tastes and trends in candle demand. The forum is a lively mosaic of voices and faces, a place where whispers of politics mingle with the chatter of everyday life. As you walk, you reflect on the subtle ways your candles influence daily Roman rituals. For instance, certain colors and scents have specific associations: white candles for purity and mourning, red for celebration and protection, and sweet, smelling herbs to ward off illness. The ritualistic aspect makes your work feel more like a sacred art than mere craft. You stop by a small shop specializing in imported waxes. The owner, a shrewd man from Alexandria, proudly shows you samples of beeswax and a curious substance called spermaceti, extracted from sperm whales. Spermaceti candles burn cleaner and longer, though they're far more expensive, a luxury few can afford. This trade connection reminds you how interconnected the ancient world was. From its vast honey supplies to distant Baltic amber, your candles carry whispers of far-off lands. You find it fascinating to think how such small objects embody the reach of empire and commerce. Back in the forum, you overhear a conversation about unusual candle uses. Apparently, some wealthy Romans use candles in elaborate theatrical performances, flickering shadows bringing mythic scenes to life under night skies. Theatrical candles sometimes had metal cores to prevent bending, a clever innovation to keep the performance seamless. Your apprentice listens wide, as you recount these details, adding light-hearted quips about how some candle makers likely wish they could patent the idea of a never-melting candle, if only to make a fortune without lifting a finger. Historians still argue whether the popularity of scented candles was a genuine preference or more a status symbol among the elite. You suspect it was a bit of both, a way to impress guests while creating a soothing atmosphere. As the sun climbs higher, you return home with your new waxes and ideas, eager to experiment with fresh blends and techniques. You're reminded again of how even the simplest flicker of flame is a complex weave of culture, science, and human desire. Later in your workshop, you start testing new recipes, carefully noting how each combination affects burning time, scent, and glow. The dance between art and chemistry keeps your mind sharp, even as your body grows tired. You chuckle softly, recalling the odd fact that some candles were dipped in perfume oils after making to extend their fragrance, a sort of ancient candle spa treatment. You consider adding that to your repertoire, knowing your customers would appreciate a bit of extra luxury. As evening approaches, you prepare for the next day's market, feeling the comforting rhythm of your trade settle around you. The world outside is vast and unpredictable, but here in the soft golden light of your candles, there's a quiet certainty. The last light fades through the cracks in the tiled workshop roof as you lean back against the cool stone wall. Your tunic is sticky, your hands smell like vinegar and soot, and your feet ache in that dull, persistent way that only candle makers truly understand. You've survived the day barely, and now the city exhales around you. Rome doesn't fall asleep so much as settle into a soft, rhythmic murmur. Out in the alley, the chorus of evening begins. Dogs bark in tired bursts. Someone down the street is playing a reed, flute not well, but earnestly. You hear the clatter of dice from a nearby tavern and the laugh of someone who just won something small but satisfying. Overhead oil lamps flicker in niches and on balconies, casting long honey-colored shadows. You close the shutters with a satisfying click, trapping the day's heat and scents inside. In the far corner, a few experimental candles still burn, slightly lopsided, one drooping like it had a particularly rough day, but all proud in their own waxy way. Your apprentice left them cooling too quickly, still better than last week, when he poured the wax over a live coal and nearly took out the drying shelf. Price, there's a strange peace to this quiet moment, the candle maker's ritual of evening. You count your cuts, inventory your failures, take stock of who paid on time, who didn't, and who needs a polite warning in the form of an oddly short, wicked candle next week. You're not a vindictive person, but you do appreciate symbolic justice in wax form. Tonight you dine simply, lentils, stale bread soaked in oil, and a plum, so ripe it practically apologizes as it falls apart in your hand. Outside, the hum of Rome continues, a city that somehow never sleeps, only paces itself. You, though, you're almost ready to lie down on the woven mat near the furnace, still warm from a day of soft heat and harder labor. Before you do, you glance at the niche where you keep your little household gods. A cracked Mercury, a lopsided clay Venus. They're dusty and uneven, just like your candles, but they've seen you through another day. You murmur a tired thanks, not expecting miracles, just maybe fewer broken molds tomorrow. Historians still debate whether candle makers of your era were truly considered artisans or more like glorified oil merchants, Some argue the profession was surprisingly lucrative in the right neighborhoods, while others suggest it was one missed payment away from ruin. Either way, you've carved a space for yourself in the flickering margins of Roman life, and there's a quiet pride in that as you lie back, listening to the pop of cooling wax and the distant hush of temple bells. A thought drifts into your tired mind. Tomorrow will be exactly like today. Maybe that should feel discouraging, but it doesn't. There's a strange comfort in the repetition, in the muscle memory of melt, pour, trim, repeat. You're a candle maker, after all. You live by slow burns and soft light. You build peace one taper at a time. And even if no one thanks you for it, especially the senators with their tight sandals and eternal complaints, they notice when the light is gone. So for now, just rest. Let the city hum around you. Let the glow of half-burned candles stretch across the walls. Let your hands go still and your breath grow soft. You've done enough for one day, and tomorrow the wax will wait, just like always.